A night janitor noticed signs everyone else overlooked, ultimately saving the life of a billionaire CEO. The executive elevator at Manhattan Business Tower had never made a stop on the 25th floor at 3 in the morning. Yet, there stood James Washington, the night janitor for 15 years, observing through the tinted glass of the boardroom as a woman collapsed onto a mahogany table that cost more than his annual income. Victoria Sterling, the chief executive officer of Sterling Industries and one of the nation's most influential women, was clearly in distress. Her face was contorted with pain. Her left arm hung lifelessly, and when she attempted to speak on the phone, her words emerged slurred and unintelligible. James recognized the indicators instantly, a stroke in progress. At 52 years of age, James had acquired his medical knowledge through challenging experiences. His wife, Dorothy, had been a nurse specializing in neurology for 20 years before her passing in an accident 5 years prior. Throughout their decades of marriage, she transformed every dinner into an emergency medicine lesson, emphasizing that medical expertise could save lives regardless of one's identity. James paused for a moment. He was the unseen janitor who maintained the offices after the executives departed. Victoria Sterling was the prominent figure whose image graced business publications, the individual who moved billions with a simple electronic message. Their worlds rarely intersected, except for the rare hallway encounters where she occasionally paid him no mind. However, Dorothy had always maintained that neurological symptoms disregarded social standing or ethnic background. James opened the conference room door. "Ms. Sterling, you are experiencing a stroke. Do not attempt to speak. Simply listen to me." His voice conveyed the composed authority of someone who had witnessed Dorothy guiding families through medical crises for 2 decades. Victoria attempted to object, but her words became even more garbled. A sense of panic began to fill her eyes as she grasped that something was gravely amiss. James was already dialing 911 while positioning Victoria to prevent further neurological damage. "Ambulance to the Manhattan Tower, 25th floor. Female patient, middle-aged, exhibiting classic stroke indicators. Facial paralysis, weakness in the left arm, impaired speech. Symptoms commenced approximately 5 minutes ago." The 911 operator expressed surprise at the medical precision of someone identifying himself as a janitor. However, James continued to furnish clinical details with the ease of a healthcare professional. When the paramedics arrived, they found Victoria stabilized in the correct posture, with James providing a detailed account of her symptoms and their progression. One of the paramedics whispered to his colleague, "This fellow knows more about neurology than half the nurses I know." At the hospital, while Victoria received the treatment that would save her life, James returned to his duties as if nothing had transpired. After all, he was merely the night janitor, the invisible figure who ensured the building's operation, while the influential slept in their residences. What James was unaware of was that this incident would reshape his life in ways even Dorothy might not have foreseen. And what Victoria Sterling would come to understand about prejudice, medicine, and the genuine definition of capability would redefine her entire perception of human worth. If you are following this narrative of how knowledge can dismantle barriers erected by wealth, please subscribe to the channel to discover how a simple act of compassion would expose a conspiracy threatening not only Victoria's existence, but the entire power structure she embodied. The subsequent morning, James arrived at work anticipating a return to normalcy. However, he encountered an unwelcome surprise awaiting him in the employee locker room, a formal written warning affixed to his locker. Inappropriate utilization of the executive elevator during work hours. Unauthorized access to corporate facilities after business hours. The signature belonged to Wilson Carter, the security manager, and the type of individual who measured his own value by his capacity to make others' lives difficult. James calmly folded the paper. 15 years of exemplary service, not a single reprimand, and now he was being penalized for rescuing the chief executive officer. The irony was palpable. Within the corporate sphere, even performing the correct action could be construed as a transgression when carried out by the wrong person. What truly unsettled James was not the warning itself, but its timing. How had Carter ascertained the previous night's events so swiftly? The hospital upheld medical confidentiality, and the paramedics had no reason to disclose details to the company. Someone was meticulously monitoring Victoria Sterling's activities. During his morning shift, James discreetly observed the activity on the 25th floor. Dr. Patterson, Victoria's personal physician, arrived 2 hours later than usual, his expression a mixture of irritation and what appeared to be genuine apprehension. Through the glass doors, James witnessed a heated exchange between the doctor and Wilson Carter. Dorothy's memory surfaced with a jolt. "Jammy," she would say when they reviewed intricate cases over dinner. When neurological symptoms manifest suddenly in stressed executives, the primary inquiry should never be, "Why now?" but rather, "Who benefits if this individual can no longer function?" James had presumed Victoria's stroke was a consequence of stress and corporate pressure. However, the tense discussion between Carter and Dr. Patterson introduced a seed of doubt that Dorothy would have identified immediately. Competent medical practitioners did not panic when patients survived medical emergencies. They celebrated. That afternoon, James received an unexpected telephone call. Victoria Sterling desired to meet with him in her office. Upon his arrival on the 25th floor, he found the CEO looking considerably better, but with an inquisitive gaze that had been absent the previous night. "James, correct?" Victoria gestured for him to occupy the chair opposite her desk. "I wish to express my personal gratitude for your actions last night. The doctor indicated your swift intervention saved my life. I merely did what any decent individual would, Ms. Sterling." Victoria scrutinized his face with growing interest. "The paramedics were impressed by your medical knowledge. Where did you acquire your understanding of neurological symptoms?" James hesitated. Discussing Dorothy invariably brought pain, but something in Victoria's expression suggested the inquiry was more than a polite gesture. "My wife was a nurse specializing in neurology, 20 years at Chicago General Hospital. She taught me to recognize emergency indicators. She passed away in an accident 5 years ago." Victoria's expression softened genuinely. "I am truly sorry for your loss." She paused, as if carefully considering her next words. "James, may I pose a peculiar question? In your informal medical assessment, did my symptoms yesterday seem natural?" The question caught James off guard. Victoria Sterling, one of the nation's most powerful figures, was soliciting a janitor's medical opinion on her own condition. Even more intriguing was the phrasing of the question, implying she suspected something was amiss. "With all due respect, Ms. Sterling, this is a matter you should discuss with your personal physician." "I have," her response came too quickly, conveying barely concealed frustration. Dr. Patterson attributed it to executive stress. He prescribed sedatives and recommended a respite. James felt a familiar chill. Dorothy had always asserted that competent physicians investigated the origins of strokes in younger patients, as if their very lives depended on it, because, indeed, they did. Prescribing sedatives to someone who had just experienced a neurological event was not only inappropriate, but potentially criminal. "Mrs. Sterling," James said cautiously, "did your wife ever mention similar symptoms prior to yesterday?" Victoria froze. "How did you—" "A stroke in someone in their 40s rarely occurs without cause. There are typically precursory signs that are either overlooked or misconstrued." A silence settled between them, as Victoria absorbed the implication. Finally, she nodded slowly. Persistent headaches, occasional bouts of dizziness, episodes of mental confusion that Dr. Patterson attributed to work-related pressures. James maintained a neutral expression, but internally Dorothy's warnings blared like sirens. Any competent neurologist would have ordered comprehensive tests given those symptoms. The fact that Dr. Patterson had disregarded them suggested either gross medical incompetence or a deliberate sinister motive. As James departed Victoria's office 15 minutes later, Wilson Carter was waiting in the hallway, conspicuously observing their meeting. The smile he offered James carried a thinly veiled threat, as if to convey, "We know you're interfering where you shouldn't be." That night, as James cleaned the deserted offices, a constant refrain from Dorothy echoed in his mind. "Jammy, there are no coincidences in medicine. When unusual patterns emerge, there's invariably someone orchestrating them. What if Victoria Sterling hadn't simply suffered a stress-induced stroke? What if someone was actively endangering her well-being?" James reflected on the warning in his locker, the confrontation between Carter and Dr. Patterson, and the way both individuals seemed to possess an undue awareness of events that should have remained confidential. For 15 years, James had been the invisible man, the janitor whom no one noticed. Yet, he was beginning to realize that invisibility could be the most potent weapon against individuals who considered themselves beyond reproach, particularly when they utterly underestimated the observational, analytical, and, if necessary, expository capabilities of a simple man. James dedicated the subsequent 2 weeks to an activity perfected over 15 years of night shifts, remaining entirely unseen while meticulously observing everything. His findings confirmed his gravest suspicions regarding Victoria Sterling's predicament. Dr. Patterson frequented Wilson Carter's office 3 times a week, consistently carrying a brown medical briefcase that never left the premises. During one such visit, James inadvertently positioned his cleaning cart too close to the partially ajar door, overhearing fragments of a conversation that sent a chill down his spine. "The tests continue to indicate progressive cardiovascular deterioration, Dr. Patterson whispered. "But I am maintaining the official reports within normal parameters, as arranged." "Perfect," Carter replied. "How much longer do you estimate?" "With the medication I am prescribing, disguised as vitamins, I would say we have another 6 months before the next significant episode, and that one will likely be fatal." James had to brace himself against the cart to avoid staggering. They weren't merely neglecting Victoria's health, they were actively poisoning her. Dorothy had always maintained that the most reprehensible medical transgression was one committed by an individual sworn to protect lives. The missing piece of the puzzle surfaced unexpectedly through Marcus Johnson, the air conditioning maintenance technician who worked in the offices during daylight hours. Marcus, 10 years James's junior, was an Afghanistan veteran who had acquired electronics expertise in the Army and now supported 3 children through contract work. "Man, you have to see this," Marcus whispered to James during a shift change on a Friday. "I was installing new filters on the 25th floor when I overheard Carter on the phone. He was talking about Sterling Industries stock, something about acquiring large quantities before impending leadership changes he was aware of." James felt the pieces click into place. Wilson Carter was not merely an accomplice. He was the mastermind behind the entire scheme. If Victoria died or became incapacitated, as the senior security manager and a member of the emergency board, Carter would assume temporary control of the company's operations. Armed with inside knowledge of the impending leadership transition, he could manipulate the stock market to amass millions. "Marcus," James said cautiously, "do you still have contacts in the military? Individuals who understand documentation and evidence?" Marcus studied James's face with the sharp perception of someone who had served in combat zones. "Depending on what you need, possibly. Why?" James made a decision that would alter everything. Over the next 2 hours, he recounted the entire narrative to Marcus. Victoria's stroke, the medical conspiracy, Carter's machinations, and his suspicions of gradual poisoning. Marcus listened attentively, interjecting with precise questions that revealed his militarily trained intellect. "That constitutes attempted murder combined with large-scale financial fraud," Marcus stated finally, "but proving it will be challenging. Do you possess any concrete evidence?" "Not yet, but I know where to obtain it." The plan they formulated was daring yet elegantly simple. Marcus would leverage his authorized access to the building's systems to discreetly install recording devices in Carter's and Dr. Patterson's offices. James, with his intimate knowledge of schedules and routines, would coordinate the operation during weekends when security was at its minimum. "One thing troubles me," Marcus remarked, as they reviewed the blueprints of the ventilation system. "Why didn't they simply dismiss you after the warning? A man who saves the CEO's life should be lauded as a hero, not hounded." James had pondered the same question. Why dismiss the hero immediately after he rescued the boss? It was more advantageous to keep the janitor invisible, where they could monitor him. "They believe I am merely an uneducated employee who happened to get lucky recognizing stroke symptoms." Carter and Dr. Patterson's arrogance is truly impressive. During their conversations, which I could partially overhear, they openly referred to me as the fortunate janitor, too ill-informed to comprehend what had truly occurred. They even chuckled about how I had stumbled into something I shouldn't have, but was too sensible to continue causing trouble. They couldn't have been more mistaken. The initial phase of the plan was executed on a Monday night. While James meticulously cleaned the 25th floor, Marcus worked silently within the ventilation shafts, installing microphones and microscopic cameras in the targeted offices. Marcus's military-style operation was remarkable. Within 45 minutes, he had established a surveillance network that would have taken a private investigator weeks to deploy. Ready, Marcus confirmed through the discreet communicator they had acquired. Now, we simply wait for them to incriminate themselves with their own words. They did not have to wait long. The following Wednesday, Carter and Dr. Patterson engaged in a meeting that was recorded in its entirety. The content was even more alarming than James had anticipated. Not only did they confirm Victoria's gradual poisoning, but they discussed in detail the method for increasing the dosage to accelerate the process. "The press will adore this story," Carter chortled. Young, successful CEO tragically felled by executive stress. "It will ignite a national conversation about mental health within the corporate world, a perfect cover for the leadership transition." James listened to the recording 3 times, each replay strengthening his resolve. Dorothy always said that knowledge without action constituted complicity. The time for action had arrived. What Carter and Dr. Patterson failed to realize was that their words had just sealed their own fate, and the unassuming janitor they had underestimated was about to demonstrate that true intelligence stemmed not from academic credentials or social standing, but from a confluence of knowledge, determination, and the most formidable weapon of all, the absolute certainty of standing on the side of justice. As he meticulously compiled the evidence destined to bring about their downfall, James smiled for the first time in weeks. Dorothy would be proud. Not only had he saved a life, but he was poised to expose a conspiracy that would shock the corporate world. The medical knowledge she had imparted was now being employed not merely for healing, but for delivering justice in a manner no court could disregard. The subsequent Wednesday would be remembered as the day arrogance met its ultimate consequence. James arrived at work carrying items Carter and Dr. Patterson would never anticipate: 3 flash drives containing 92 hours of recordings, 15 scanned fraudulent medical documents, and financial evidence meticulously compiled by a former military accountant. Marcus had done more than install surveillance equipment. His military contacts included experts in financial crime who had analyzed Carter's stock purchasing patterns with the precision of military intelligence. The outcome was devastating. 341 suspicious transactions, all timed perfectly with Victoria's medical episodes. However, James had conceived a plan extending beyond merely submitting the evidence to the authorities. Carter and Dr. Patterson needed to comprehend that they had underestimated the wrong man in the most humiliating manner possible. The initial phase commenced during the monthly Sterling Industries Executive Board meeting. Victoria, still recuperating and diligently taking the vitamins prescribed by Dr. Patterson, presided over the table as 15 executives deliberated quarterly reports. Carter occupied his usual position to her right, exuding the confidence of someone who believed he held the future in his hands. James entered the conference room with his cleaning cart, as he had done countless times before. This time, however, as he discreetly emptied the wastebaskets, he placed a sealed envelope atop Victoria's stack of documents. Upon opening it, she discovered a single typed line: "The vitamins you are taking are not vitamins. Check the bottle. Someone who cares." Victoria's expression shifted subtly, but Carter, engrossed in presenting financial projections, failed to notice. James observed from a distance as she surreptitiously examined the bottle of supplements she habitually carried in her purse. 15 years of invisibility had honed his ability to interpret facial expressions with surgical precision. Victoria had just realized that something was fundamentally amiss. The second phase unfolded 2 hours later, when Dr. Patterson arrived for his weekly routine consultation with Victoria. He was unaware that James had installed a directional microphone in the office lamp, or that Marcus was recording everything from a van parked across the street. "How are your stress symptoms, Victoria?" Dr. Patterson inquired with the feigned solicitude James had learned to abhor. "Have you been taking your supplements as directed?" "Religiously," Victoria replied, but her tone carried a note of suspicion that caused the doctor to shift uncomfortably in his chair. "Actually, doctor, I am considering a second medical opinion, purely to ensure we are obtaining the optimal treatment." James observed panic flash across Dr. Patterson's face through the microscopic camera Marcus had installed. "That is entirely unnecessary, Victoria. Your tests indicate steady improvement. A second opinion could complicate the treatment." "And how curious," Victoria interrupted, opening a desk drawer. "Because I received this today." She produced the envelope James had left, along with a bottle of supplements. "Someone suggests these are not vitamins. What would you say if I submitted them for independent laboratory analysis?" Dr. Patterson visibly paled. "Victoria, you cannot possibly take an anonymous note seriously. This is clearly an attempt to sabotage your medical regimen. Some disgruntled employee seeking to stir up trouble. Then you would not object if I had them tested?" The question was phrased with the precision of someone accustomed to high-stakes corporate negotiations. Well, of course I would not object, but it would be a regrettable waste of time and resources. I can assure you of that." Victoria raised her hand, silencing him. "Dr. Patterson, in 15 years as a CEO, I have learned that when someone endeavors to dissuade me from investigating something, that is precisely when I must investigate it. The third phase was executed with military precision. While Dr. Patterson attempted to persuade Victoria against testing the supplements, Marcus was delivering complete copies of all the evidence to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the State Medical Board, and the Chicago Tribune. James had insisted that Victoria be apprised of the truth before the story became public knowledge. She was entitled to the full clarity of how her existence had been orchestrated, broadcast to the entire globe. Thus, on Friday afternoon at precisely 5 o'clock, James approached Victoria's executive suite, his briefcase a harbinger of monumental shifts. "May I enter, Mrs. Sterling?" he inquired, his tone deferential. "There's a crucial matter you must be apprised of." Victoria's gaze lifted instantly, recognizing the custodian who had twice preserved her life. "Certainly, James," she responded warmly. "In fact, I wish to express my gratitude once more, and to understand how you became aware of the supplements." James carefully set the briefcase on her desk, a gesture imbued with gravity. "Miss Sterling," he began, "what I'm about to reveal will undoubtedly shock you. However, it is imperative you know before the media disseminates the account tomorrow morning." For the subsequent 45 minutes, James meticulously laid out each piece of evidence, audio recordings of Carter and Dr. Patterson detailing the systematic poisoning, the fabricated medical records, and the financial records demonstrating Carter's manipulation of the stock market, predicated on her impending health decline. Victoria absorbed this information in profound silence, her expression transitioning from astonishment to outright horror, and finally to a chilling resolve that James recognized as the contained ferocity of someone accustomed to command. "They presumed I was merely an unlettered custodian," James remarked upon concluding his presentation. "Someone fortunate enough to identify stroke symptoms but lacking the intellect to grasp the underlying scheme." "And you deciphered it all," Victoria murmured, examining the evidence with the same sharp focus she'd apply to a multi-billion-dollar corporate negotiation. "James, you've been my savior 3 times. Twice from immediate medical peril, and once from a deep-seated conspiracy." What transpired next surpassed even James's own aspirations for retribution. Victoria Sterling was not merely a successful chief executive officer, she was a formidable corporate strategist who had built her empire by navigating and neutralizing those who sought to undermine her. By Saturday morning, when Carter arrived for an urgent meeting Victoria had summoned, he encountered not only her but also federal agents from the FBI, representatives from the Securities and Exchange Commission, and an investigator from the State Medical Board. "Wilson," Victoria stated, her voice possessing the frigid finality of someone terminating an underperforming employee, "I wish to introduce you to individuals keenly interested in your extracurricular endeavors." Carter attempted to maintain his composure, but James, observing the scene remotely via security cameras that Marcus had covertly accessed, witnessed the precise instant his colleague's bravado dissolved into palpable dread. "Victoria, what is the meaning of this?" Carter stammered. "If this is about some baseless accusation—" Victoria interrupted, a humorless smile gracing her lips. "Wilson, they are not here to entertain accusations. They are here to effect arrests based on irrefutable proof of attempted murder, financial malfeasance, and market manipulation." Special Agent Martinez proceeded to read Carter his constitutional rights, as he vociferously denied any wrongdoing, his desperation evident as he finally comprehended the utter collapse of his strategy. Dr. Patterson was apprehended concurrently at his clinic, law enforcement placing handcuffs on him as he frantically attempted to erase data from his computer. The fourth and final act proved exceptionally gratifying. On Monday, the Chicago Tribune published the complete narrative on its front page, emblazoned with the headline, "Janitor Hero Uncovers Plot to Assassinate Millionaire CEO." James's story, a narrative of a working-class black man, leveraging medical acumen inherited from his wife to rescue a prominent white executive, thereby exposing a vast corporate conspiracy, resonated deeply with the national consciousness. However, the ultimate triumph materialized when Victoria convened a press conference before a throng of cameras. She not only corroborated every detail of James's account, but also announced his immediate appointment as Director of Corporate Safety and Integrity at Sterling Industries, with an annual salary of $200,000. James Washington, she declared to the assembled media, has demonstrated that competence, integrity, and intellect are not contingent upon academic credentials or societal standing. They are manifestations of character, and he possesses it in abundance. Carter and Dr. Patterson observed the press conference from their respective holding cells, realizing their downfall was complete. They had been vanquished not only legally, but also publicly humiliated by the very custodian they had dismissed as insignificant, believing they could manipulate indefinitely. The final stroke of irony was exquisitely delivered. While Carter faced a 25-year prison sentence for attempted murder and financial fraud, and Dr. Patterson forfeited his medical license and confronted a 15-year incarceration, James was being hailed nationwide as a hero who validated that genuine intelligence originates from compassion, not social stratification. Dorothy would have been immensely proud. Her legacy of medical knowledge had not only saved lives, but it also brought to light a pervasive corruption that could have devastated countless others. And the man she had loved was finally receiving the acclaim he unequivocally deserved, a testament to the fact that justice on occasion not only prevails, but does so with spectacular, unassailable satisfaction. 6 months later, James Washington occupied his new office on the 26th floor of Sterling Industries, offering a panoramic vista of Chicago. A polished brass sign on his door proclaimed, "Director of Security and Corporate Integrity." The man once regarded as an overlooked janitor now commanded a team of 15 investigators specializing in the detection of corporate fraud. The irony was profoundly satisfying. The very building where he had spent 15 years maneuvering cleaning carts now welcomed him as an executive, complete with his own spacious desk and a $2 million budget dedicated to implementing security protocols that other corporations were actively studying as a benchmark. Marcus Johnson, newly appointed as coordinator of electronic security, entered the office, his arms laden with reports on their groundbreaking new surveillance system. "Man, I still can't quite believe we're here," he commented, gazing out at the glass skyscrapers. "Remember when you used to polish these very floors?" "I remember every inch of this facility," James replied with a smile, affixing his signature to approvals for the scholarship initiative Victoria had established in Dorothy Washington's honor. "The fundamental difference now is my capacity to enact change from within." The Dorothy Washington program provided comprehensive medical scholarships to students from underprivileged backgrounds, with a particular emphasis on neurology and emergency medicine. In just 2 years, it had already assisted 120 young individuals, many of whom were the children of custodians, security personnel, and manual laborers who had never dared to dream that their offspring could aspire to become physicians. Meanwhile, Wilson Carter was serving his 25-year sentence in a federal penitentiary located in Illinois, where he rapidly discovered that his ingrained corporate arrogance held no sway. His assets had been seized to recompense the victims of his stock market manipulations, rendering him reliant on public legal assistance, the very system he had once disdained from his position of power. Dr. Patterson, thoroughly discredited and permanently stripped of his medical licensure, found employment as a medical equipment salesman, earning a mere fraction of his former physician's salary. His professional reputation was so irrevocably tarnished that no medical institution in the country would offer him employment, even for administrative roles. The medical community had united to ensure he would never again endanger patient lives. Victoria Sterling had successfully transformed Sterling Industries into a national exemplar of corporate rectitude. Under her revitalized leadership, the company instituted independent medical oversight for all executive personnel, established anonymous reporting mechanisms, and enforced stringent anti-discrimination mandates. The company's stock value tripled within 2 years, a clear demonstration that ethical practices and profitability could indeed coexist harmoniously. "James," Victoria remarked, entering his office for their weekly briefing, "I've just received a call from the White House. They wish for you to testify before Congress regarding corporate medical reform." James inclined his head, now accustomed to the national recognition his extraordinary journey had garnered. Books had been authored, documentaries produced, and medical schools incorporated his narrative into their curriculum, highlighting the critical importance of clinical observation independent of formal credentials. The most profound reward, however, came in the form of correspondence. Hundreds of everyday workers shared how James's story had emboldened them to trust their own insights, to challenge injustice, and to believe that capability is not dictated by social standing. "Do you know what Dorothy would say about all of this?" James inquired, his gaze resting on her photograph displayed on his desk, now housed in an elegant silver frame instead of the simple holder he had carried for years. "That medicine saved more than just a life," Victoria responded softly. "It safeguarded the truth." James nodded, contemplating how his inherited knowledge had blossomed into social justice and ultimately systemic transformation. Carter and Patterson had erroneously believed they were manipulating an unsophisticated janitor, tragically underestimating the potency of a man acutely aware of his identity and inherent value. The salient lesson illuminated by this account was unequivocally clear. Authentic intelligence does not reside in framed diplomas, but in the convergence of knowledge, character, and the fortitude to act decisively when circumstances demand. James had indisputably proven that competence recognizes no distinctions of race, social strata, or hierarchical position. It acknowledges only the unvarnished truth. Today, when young laborers confront discrimination or injustice, they frequently ponder, what would James Washington do? The answer invariably remains consistent. Observe, acquire knowledge, document meticulously, and execute with the precision of a surgeon, a strategist who comprehends that the ultimate victory lies in achieving a level of success utterly unimaginable to one's oppressors. If this testament to how knowledge and unwavering determination can dismantle prejudice has resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel for additional narratives that underscore the transformative power of justice when rightfully administered. Thank you.